Alright, Eucathol Audio is back on. Stag up. Rack attack. You know when you look at a stag, you see nothing but horns. That stands for the big brain. You got your own laurel. You don't let it be elusive. Now, I'm all the time telling you, you have to think for yourself, put this stuff together, and realize that they're playing you, they're jaking you. It's a game. It's entertainment, and you better figure out the fact that the Mandela effectively controls your mind. They're playing with you, and you letting them as long as you don't get up and figure this out, because it's what it is. Now I'm gonna let Michelle take it from here because she has done the research, and hey, nobody wants to hear it from me. Y'all want to hear it from somebody. You know, you need another voice. So here it is, delivered.
I am finding many interconnections in my research with regards to what I am sharing about the ancient and advanced Moorish civilization that is missing from our historical record. There are definitely correlations and relationships between railroad systems, canal systems, and starports, as you will see. Pay close attention to the dates when they are telling us this infrastructure was built, and compare those dates with what we are taught in the historical narrative we've been given.
There's no way.
I.e., were we really capable of accomplishing these massive engineering feats such as these during the time period they were said to have been built?
Not according to the narrative that they running. No way.
This is just a dip in the pool of information on this topic, as there is such an overwhelming amount of data concerning even just railroads and their associated infrastructure that I find myself having to focus the scope of this video and not include much of what I had originally envisioned for it. There is just way too much information to choose from. The history of rail transportation
all
in
human culture, all man
started with the construction of wooden railroads
everybody knew
called
that
wagonways
there's a
starting
superior
in the 1720s.
culture. There's a
the French
correct way
were
to do
said
this
to have
shit,
used a railroad
and everybody
in its
knew it.
construction in 1720 of the fortress of Louisbourg on Nova Scotia's Cape Breton Island. Between 1762 and 1764, an efficient gravity railroad called Montresor's Tramway was said to have been designed and built by British engineers at the close of the French and Indian War, which we are told went between 1756 and 1763, to haul goods up the steep slope at the Niagara River near the Niagara Falls Escarpment at Lewiston, New York. As an interesting aside, compare the Niagara Escarpment in appearance on the left with the Endless Wall at the New River Gorge State Park in West Virginia on the right. In 1810, the Scottish-American quarry owner Thomas Leiper was said to have built the animal-powered Leiper Railroad connecting Crum Creek to Ridley Creek in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, to carry his quarried stone to Tidewater. It was said to have been a horse-drawn 3/4-mile railroad. It became the Crum Creek branch of the Baltimore and Philadelphia, later part of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, in 1887. More on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad shortly.
These folks were so busy, man. They was doing all kinds of everything.
Thomas Leiper's son was credited with building the 3-mile-long Leiper Canal to replace the Leiper Railroad in 1828 and 1829. In the middle of what was called the American Canal Age between 1790 and 1855, when the Lehigh Canal was built between Easton, Pennsylvania and Mock Chunk, now known as Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, said to have been started in 1818 and completed in 1838, during which time the Schuylkill Canal, also known as the Schuylkill Navigation, was said to have been built in Pennsylvania between 1815 and 1825, as well as the 82-mile or 132-kilometer Union Canal in southeastern Pennsylvania between Middletown, Pennsylvania to Reading, Pennsylvania, said to have been built between 1792 and 1828 and closed in the 1880s. This is the Union Canal Tunnel in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. and what remains of the Union Canal at Spotara State Park near Lickdale, Pennsylvania. The 14-mile or 22.5-kilometer long Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, connecting the Delaware River in the state of Delaware and the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, with its construction said to have been started in 1804 and completed in 1829, as well as the 363-mile or 584-kilometer long Erie Canal, connecting the Hudson River in Albany, New York, with Lake Erie and Buffalo, New York, and first used on May 17, 1821. The construction of the Erie Canal was said to have started on July 4, 1817, in Rome, New York, where Fort Stanwix, said to have been built in 1758 by the British, was located. The New York Central Railroad, primarily operating in the Great Lakes and Mid-Atlantic regions, had a train station in Rome. The New York Central Railroad was said to have begun operating in 1853 with the consolidation of earlier independent companies running between Albany and Buffalo. This graphic depicts the New York Central Rail system as of 1918. We are told extensive trackage existed in the states of New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Massachusetts, and West Virginia, plus additional trackage in Ontario and Quebec, and by 1925 operated 26,395 miles, or 42,479 kilometers, of track. Now back to railroads circa 1826. In 1826, the state of Massachusetts incorporated the Granite Railway in Quincy, Massachusetts, as a common freight carrier to transport granite for the construction of the Bunker Hill Monument, which was said to have commenced in the same year of 1826, and which just happens to be a huge obelisk on the scale of the Washington Monument. Other railroads authorized by states in 1826 included the Delaware and Hudson Canal Company's Gravity Railroad, the Mohawk and Hudson Railroad to carry freight and passengers and linking the Mohawk River in Schenectady with the Hudson River at Albany, and said to have been the first railroad chartered in the country, incorporated in 1826 and opened in 1831. In 1827, the state of Maryland chartered the Baltimore and Ohio B&O Railroad, the first common carrier and the oldest railroad in the United States. The first section of the B&O Railroad was said to have opened in 1830, and it was said to have reached the Ohio River in 1852, the first Eastern Seaboard Railroad to do so. We are told there was an intense rivalry between the B&O Railroad and the Chesapeake and Ohio, or C&O Canal, with each project choosing the same day to break ground, on July 4th, 1828. Both projects were said to be vying for the narrow right-of-way where the Potomac River cuts through a mountain ridge at Point of Rocks, Maryland, which ended up in court. Even though, after 4 years, the case was said to have been ruled in favor of the canal, we are told the C&O had to allow the B&O to go through there. So this is a place where the canal and the railroad run side by side, shown on the left, just like the picture I showed earlier of the railroad next to the Lehigh Canal in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, on the right. Similar to the B&O Railroad, the South Carolina Canal and Railroad Company was also chartered in 1827 to connect Charleston, South Carolina to the Savannah River, and its first 6-mile or 10-kilometer rail line was said to have been in operation by 1830, and ran scheduled steam service over its 136-mile or 219-mile line from Charleston to Hamburg, South Carolina, beginning in 1833. This was the historic Camden Depot in Charleston, said to have been built by the South Carolina Railroad in 1849 and 1850 by architect Edward C. Jones. In my research of the South Carolina Canal and Railroad Company, I am seeing all railroad-related information and no canal-related information. So I looked up canals in South Carolina, and this is what I found. So obviously there were canals in South Carolina, but hardly any clarity on who actually built them, nor is there much information available about them.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. I'm gonna check that out, dude. I mean, they can't. There's just so much that there's no way that they cover all the bases,
This is one of several
dude.
star forts that were located in the Pensacola, Florida area. This is the former location of what was called the Fort of Pensacola, where the CSX rail yards are just a few blocks south of where the fort was located. At one time, this was part of the Pensacola Railroad system that was completed in 1860. By the year of 1850, there were 9,000 miles or 14,000 kilometers of railroad lines said to have been built in the United States. We are told that the federal government operated a land grant system between 1855 and 1871, where new railway companies, in what we are told was the uninhabited West, were given millions of acres they could sell or pledge to bondholders. The establishment of a land grant system at this time is a good place to insert once again the story of the Ames brothers of Easton, Massachusetts, co-owners of the Ames Shovel Shop, nationally known for providing the shovels for the Union Pacific Railroad, which we are told opened the West.
All right, yes.
It was said to have been the world's largest supplier of shovels in the 19th century.
Let's get it in there.
Not only that, one brother, Oliver Ames Jr., who was born in 1807 and died in 1877, was the president of the Union Pacific Railroad from when it met the Central Pacific Railroad in Utah for the completion of the first transcontinental railroad in North America. The other brother, Oakes Ames, was a member of the United States Congress House of Representatives from Massachusetts' 2nd District from 1863 to 1873. He was credited by many as being the most important influence in the building of the Union Pacific portion of the first transcontinental railroad. Oakes Ames was also noted for his involvement in the Credit Mobilier scandal of 1867 regarding the improper sale of stock of the railroad's construction company. He was formally censured by Congress in 1873 for his involvement, and he died in the same year. 10 years later, he was posthumously exonerated by the Massachusetts State Legislature in May of 1883. This is the Ames Monument near Laramie in Wyoming, said to have been built between 1880 and 1882. It was dedicated to the Ames brothers for their role in financing the Union Pacific Railroad. Serious conflicts of interest, and graft much, but no real consequences to their memory. There is one more U.S. railroad that I would like to take a look at before moving on, which is the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad in Mississippi, with the reason given for its construction being the opening of a vast expanse of southern yellow pine forest for commercial harvest. It was said to have been developed under 3 charters provided by the Mississippi State Legislature, with the first charter being granted in 1850, the second one in 1856, and the last one in 1887. And the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad was opened in 1882, with Gulfport, Mississippi being the railroad terminal and headquarters. What is really interesting to me is that while there is a deep water harbor
Wow.
protected by Ship Island in the Gulf of Mexico just off the coast of Mississippi,
See that?
there is also a star fort called Fort Massachusetts,
Ah,
said to have been built following the War of 1812.
of course.
Onward to Canada. The Champlain and St. Lawrence Railway was the first Canadian railway chartered in 1832 and built in 1835. It was said to have been financed by Montreal businessman and brewery owner John Molson. It ran for a distance of just over 14 miles or 23 kilometers, starting operation on the 21st of July, 1836, and linking La Prairie, a city across the St. Lawrence River from Montreal, to St. John on the Richelieu River to cut time from the trip between Montreal and New York. A Stephenson-Sampson steam locomotive was said to have pulled 2 coaches on a round trip from La Prairie. In 1851, an extension was added to this rail line from Rouse's Point in New York. Canada's Grand Railway hotels were said to have been built by the Canadian railway companies, with the development of the railways said to have acted as a catalyst for their construction. The use of towers and turrets were said to be a signature style for Canada's majestic hotels. It is important to note that towers and turrets are a signature of Moorish architecture. Right next to the main train station of Montreal, the Windsor Station, said to have been built between 1887 and 1889, was the Windsor Hotel in Montreal, the first Grand Railway hotel, said to have been built in 1878 on the top, compared with that of the Westin Palace Hotel in Madrid, Spain, where the Moors do have a historical presence, on the bottom. Other Canadian Grand Railway hotels include the second Hotel Vancouver, said to have been built by the Canadian Pacific Railway between 1912 and 1916, keeping in mind World War I was between 1914 and 1918, and the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City, said to have been built by the Canadian Pacific Railway between 1892 and 1893 on the top, which reminds me of the Chios Castle in Poland, said to have been built between 1288 and 1292 on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, other historic train stations around the world include the Tokyo Station in the Marunouchi district of Tokyo, Japan, which was said to have opened in 1914.
Ah.
And here it is today, with a fair amount of the original buildings still intact. Here's the Amsterdam Central Railway Station, said to have been built starting in 1882 and opened in 1889.
Of course.
And the Gare d'Orsay in Paris, said to have opened in 1900.
Yeah.
And the caption of this photo of inside this railroad terminal reads, "Electric trains operating in the Gare d'Orsay circa 1900. This leads me to look up the definition of terminal, for which there are 2 nouns.
Mm-hmm.
1, the end of a railroad or other transportation route, or a station such as a point. And 2, a point of connection for closing an electric circuit. I believe we are talking about a sophisticated electrical circuitry system that the master builders of the ancient and advanced civilization built into the physical infrastructure of the planetary grid system and accessed free energy to provide electrical power for this civilization worldwide, including all transportation systems. One more thought in closing. I came across this picture of a painting called The Excavation of Pennsylvania Station, painted by George Wesley Bellows in 1909 in New York City. While it could certainly mean the act or process of digging in and of itself, It has a subtler meaning associated in archaeology with removing something specific from the ground to find artifacts. So what kind of excavation are we seeing here? There are some interesting things going on here to include what looks like tracks of some kind in the left midground. This is the original Pennsylvania station in New York, said to have been built between 1905 and 1910 and demolished in 1963. Why build a massive building of heavy masonry and demolish it after only 53 years of use? This makes no sense, and was the fate of many of these original railroad terminals. I personally think all of this infrastructure was being dug out of the mud created by a worldwide liquefaction event that took place around 1740 to 1741, and that humanity's new historical narrative was kicked off in 1851 with the Great Exhibition.
That's what I've been
held
saying,
in the
dude.
Crystal Palace in London.
She's
I
on
did
to some
not
of this
start
stuff
from
for
this
sure.
perspective.
I don't agree with everything she's
I
saying,
have
but hell,
come
it's all just
to this
speculation
conclusion
anyhow.
from my research.
None of us know
Even in this
for
video,
certain.
there are a
Shit.
lot of things happening in the time frame around the date of 1850. In my next video, I'm going to look closely at the related subject of streetcar systems around the world. I am adding this slide to my videos.
Alright, y'all. I mean, this is what it is. There's a Eucathol culture. It's good throughout the whole. Everybody knowed about it, and I'm on a mission to rediscover it. I'm gonna find it, and I'm gonna share it, because we're gonna get it right around here. Until next time, take care.